I say it because I've spent my whole life trying to understand how nature really works, and I've discovered something very important. The biggest obstacle to understanding anything is not ignorance. It's confidence in false beliefs. You know, when I was a young physicist, I was absolutely certain about all sorts of things. I would read a paper, learn something new, and immediately I was convinced I understood it. But then I would try to explain it to a colleague, and I would get stuck. I would fumble around with the words, and I would realize, with a little embarrassment, that I didn't actually understand it at all. I had just memorized it. I knew the words, but I didn't know the thing. That's when I learned something crucial. I learned that there's a difference between knowing the name of something and understanding something. Let me give you an example. Let's say you see a beautiful bird. It's brown and has a lovely song. Now, you could call it a brown-throated thrush. In Germany, they call it something else entirely, and in China, they have a completely different name for it. But here's the thing. Knowing all those names doesn't tell you anything real about the bird. You don't know why it sings the way it does. You don't know how it finds its way when it travels thousands of miles. You only know what people call it. That's not understanding. That's just collecting words. And this is exactly what happens with most of our beliefs. We believe something, we learn a fancy explanation for why it's true, and then we think we understand it. But we don't. We just have a collection of words that sound convincing. Now, let me tell you about 5 specific reasons why your beliefs are probably wrong. And as I go through these, I want you to think about your own beliefs. Test them against what I'm saying. Don't just accept what I tell you. That would just be replacing one false belief with another. The first reason your belief is wrong is something called confirmation bias, and it's one of the most pervasive tricks that your mind plays on you. Let me explain what it is. Your brain doesn't look for the truth in a neutral way. Instead, it looks for information that agrees with what you already believe. It actively searches for confirmation. Here's an experiment that was done about 60 years ago by a psychologist named Peter Wason. He gave college students a very simple task. He showed them a sequence of numbers, 2, 4, 6, and he told them their job was to figure out the rule that generated this sequence. They could propose their own sequences, and he would tell them whether each sequence followed the rule or not. Now, the actual rule was very simple, just any numbers in increasing order. But here's what happened. The students would form a hypothesis, like even numbers increasing by 2. And then do you know what they would do? They would only test sequences that fit their hypothesis. They would propose 8, 10, 12. 8, 10, 12 works. Yes, that fits my rule. Or 16, 18, 20. That fits too. And they would become more and more confident. But they never proposed something like 1, 3, 5. If they had done that, they would have discovered that the real rule was much simpler than they thought. Only a few of the 29 students figured out the correct rule. The rest became confident in their wrong hypothesis because they were only testing things that confirmed what they already believed. And this is happening in your head right now. When you believe something, let's say you believe that people from a certain group are lazy, or that a particular diet works, or that one political side is completely right and the other is completely wrong. Your mind doesn't look for evidence against that belief. It looks for evidence in favor of it. You read articles that support your view. You remember conversations that prove your point. You forget or dismiss the conversations that contradict you. Someone might tell you a story about a person from that group who is hardworking. And what does your brain do? It finds an exception. It says, oh well, that person is unusual. You don't incorporate that information into your overall belief. But when you hear about someone from that group who is lazy, your brain says, proof. Even if it's just one person and you know 100 hardworking people from that same group. This is automatic. You don't choose to do it. Your brain does it without your permission, without your awareness. And the more important the belief is to you, the stronger this effect becomes. If you have a deep political conviction, your brain becomes even more biased in how it searches for information. It's like you're building a wall between yourself and anything that might challenge what you believe. That brings me to the second reason your belief is wrong. It's related to something I'll call motivated reasoning. You believe what you want to believe, not what the evidence suggests. This is different from confirmation bias because it's about desire. You want something to be true, and so you believe it. Think about it like this. If I told you that a medicine could improve your health, you would evaluate the evidence for that claim. But if I told you that the medicine was expensive and difficult to take, you would evaluate that same evidence much more carefully. You'd be skeptical. But the interesting thing is, when the conclusion is something you want to be true, you require less evidence. You ask yourself, can I believe this, rather than must I believe this? This is something psychologists have discovered in their experiments. Let me give you a concrete example. Imagine you really believe that a particular diet makes you healthier. You start the diet enthusiastically. Now, on the days when you follow the diet and feel good, you remember those days vividly. You tell your friends about them. You think about them. On the days when you follow the diet and feel lousy, you minimize them. You think, oh, maybe I didn't sleep well, or maybe I was stressed. You don't think the diet failed because you don't want it to fail. You want it to believe the diet works, and so you do believe it, regardless of what the actual evidence is. This is also unconscious. You're not lying to yourself deliberately. You're just unconsciously choosing which evidence to pay attention to and which to ignore. Your mind is protecting your belief because the belief matters to you. It's part of your identity. You've told people about this diet. You've spent money on it. Admitting it doesn't work would be uncomfortable, so your mind just doesn't admit it. The third reason your belief is wrong is something that happens in your memory, and it's absolutely brilliant in how it works. We don't remember facts accurately. We remember them in a way that supports our beliefs. We literally rewrite our own history. There's something called the backfire effect. Let me describe it to you. Imagine you have a belief. Scientists conduct a study that proves your belief is false. They show you the evidence very clearly. What happens? Do you change your mind? Sometimes. But often, what happens is the opposite. You believe the belief even more strongly than before. How is that possible? Here's how. When you encounter evidence that contradicts your belief, your brain actually produces a stress response. You feel uncomfortable, and to relieve that discomfort, your brain doesn't accept the evidence. Instead, it actually strengthens your original belief. It's like your mind is saying, no, no, no. I know what I know. This evidence must be wrong somehow. And then, when you remember the encounter later, you don't remember the evidence that was presented. You remember the feeling of certainty you felt about your belief. You remember yourself defending it successfully in your own mind. You remember all the reasons why the evidence might have been flawed, even if they weren't. I'll give you an example from politics because it's very clear. Suppose you support a particular political candidate. Now suppose you see a study that shows the candidate said something that wasn't true. What happens? Well, some people look at the study and change their views, certainly. But many people look at that study and become even more convinced that the candidate is good and the study is biased. Why? Because accepting the study would require them to admit they were wrong, and that creates discomfort. So instead, they attack the source of the study. They say it's biased. They say it's politically motivated. And then later, when they remember this interaction, they remember it as a victory for their side. They remember dismissing biased evidence. They don't remember simply rejecting facts they didn't want to believe. This is a really important point because it means that showing someone evidence against their belief might actually make them believe the wrong thing even more strongly. The belief is now reinforced both emotionally, because they defended it, and in memory, because they remember the defense, not the evidence. Now, the fourth reason your belief is wrong is very subtle, and I find it deeply interesting. It's about something called the availability heuristic. This is a shortcut your brain uses to judge whether something is true, and it's usually wrong. Here's how it works. Your brain assumes that if you can easily think of examples of something, then that something must be common. If you can't think of examples, it must be rare. Sounds reasonable, right? But it's not. Because what determines whether you can think of examples is not how common they actually are. What determines it is how memorable they are and how much you've been exposed to them. Let me give you a simple example. Which is more common as a cause of death in the United States? Diabetes or shark attacks? Most people would probably say shark attacks if they think about it quickly. Why? Because shark attack stories are memorable. They're dramatic. They get talked about a lot. They stick in your memory. But in reality, diabetes kills far more people than shark attacks. Many, many more. But because shark attacks are more vivid and memorable, people overestimate how common they are. Now, apply this to your beliefs. If you have a belief and you're exposed to many examples that confirm it, you'll think the belief is correct even if you're just seeing a biased sample. For instance, if a TV show depicts members of a particular group a certain way many times, you'll think that portrayal is accurate. Not because the group really is that way, but because those examples are so available in your memory. Or let me think of another example. Suppose you believe that airplane crashes are very common and dangerous. How did you get that belief? Probably because you've heard about airplane crashes many times. They're reported in the news. They're dramatic. You remember them. But statistically, flying is incredibly safe. You're much more likely to be injured driving to the airport than you are flying in the plane. But you don't remember every safe drive to the airport. You only remember the one time you saw a terrible accident on the highway. So your memory of memorable events distorts your assessment of actual probability. And here's where it gets really interesting for your beliefs. Most of your beliefs aren't about things you've actually observed yourself. They're about things you've heard about, read about, or seen on screens. So the availability of information about those things is not determined by how true they are. It's determined by what gets talked about, what gets repeated, what creates emotional reactions. Your brain is taking that distorted availability and using it as a measure of truth. It's no wonder your beliefs are wrong. The fifth reason, and I think this is the deepest one, is that you have a bias toward the explanations you already know. This is harder to see because it's about how you interpret information, not what information you seek out. Let me try to explain it. When you encounter a fact or an observation, your brain tries to explain it. But it doesn't consider all possible explanations. It considers the explanations you already know, and then you evaluate those explanations. But here's the problem. The explanations you already know are usually the ones that support your existing worldview. They're the ones you've learned from sources you trust, from people in your community, from media you consume. You're not evaluating all possible explanations. You're evaluating a selected subset of explanations, a subset that's biased toward confirming what you already think. Let me give you a concrete example. Suppose something happens in the economy. Prices go up, or unemployment increases, or the stock market falls. Now, suppose you have a belief about what causes economic changes. Maybe you believe government intervention causes problems, or maybe you believe the free market causes problems. When you encounter this economic news, what happens? You don't consider a wide range of possible causes. You generate an explanation that fits your existing belief. You generate it quickly, without much thought. Your brain presents it to you as the explanation. And because it fits with what you already know, because it's coherent with your worldview, you accept it. But someone else, with a different starting belief, will generate a different explanation for the same facts. They'll believe their explanation is right, and you believe yours is right, and you're both wrong. You're both using biased explanations instead of carefully investigating what actually causes economic changes. This happens in science all the time. A scientist has a theory. An unexpected observation is made. The scientist doesn't ask, "What does this observation tell me?" The scientist asks, "How can I explain this observation using my existing theory?" And often, they can. The theory is flexible enough to accommodate the observation. So the scientist believes the theory even more strongly. But the theory might be wrong. The observation might be pointing towards something completely different. This is why, in good science, we have double-blind experiments and controls. We have peer review. We have people actively trying to prove our hypotheses wrong. We do all these things because we know about this bias. We know that human reasoning is not neutral. It's not objective. It's inherently biased toward confirming what we already believe and explaining away anything that contradicts it. So those are 5 reasons why your belief is wrong. Now, you might be thinking, well, if all my beliefs are wrong, what am I supposed to do? That's a good question. Let me tell you what I think. First, you have to understand something. I haven't said all your beliefs are false. Some of them might be correct, but most of them are probably incomplete or partially wrong or viewed from a skewed angle. What I'm saying is that you should be suspicious of your confidence. When you feel very confident that you're right, that's when you should be most careful. That's when your mind is most biased. Here's what you can do. First, actively look for evidence against your beliefs. I mean, really actively. If you believe something, spend some time deliberately searching for evidence that contradicts it. Not to be depressed or to lose your faith in things, but to get a more accurate picture. Read sources that disagree with you. Listen to people who think differently. And don't do this as an exercise in argument, where you're looking for holes in their reasoning so you can win. Do this as an exercise in genuine understanding. Ask yourself, what is the strongest version of this alternative view? What would a smart person who disagrees with me say about my belief? Second, Separate the name of something from the thing itself. This is something I've talked about before, but it's worth repeating. Just because you know a term for something doesn't mean you understand it. If you believe something, ask yourself, could I explain this to someone who knows nothing about it? Could I explain it without using jargon? If you can't, then you don't understand it as well as you think. Third, try to think about why people believe differently than you do. Don't assume they're stupid or evil or deliberately deceptive. Try to understand what evidence looks like from their perspective. What would it take for you to change your mind? And what would it take for them to change theirs? If you can't answer these questions, it means you don't understand your own belief very well. Fourth, stay curious about what you don't know. Remember the availability heuristic. Your brain assumes that if you can't think of something, it doesn't exist. So deliberately force yourself to notice what you haven't heard about. Are there perspectives I'm not exposed to? Are there facts I haven't encountered? And fifth, accept that you will always be wrong about some things. Not everything, hopefully, but some things. The goal is not to have perfect beliefs. The goal is to have beliefs that are as accurate as possible given what you know, and to keep updating them as you learn new things. The goal is to recognize that your current understanding is incomplete and to be willing to change it. You know, one of the most important things I learned as a physicist is that nature doesn't care what you believe. It just is what it is. A bridge doesn't fall down because you have the wrong belief about physics. It falls down because the forces involved don't match your calculations. Reality constrains what's true. But in everyday life, in politics, in relationships, in personal beliefs, the constraints are looser. You can hold wrong beliefs for a long time without direct consequences. You can convince yourself you're right. You can build entire worldviews on false assumptions. And because there's no bridge that collapses, no clear feedback from reality, you never find out. But you know what? Even though the constraints are looser, there are still constraints. There's still reality. People around you see things differently. Problems don't get solved the way you expect. Your life doesn't go the way you predicted. These are all signals that something in your understanding is off. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to think about a belief you hold, something you're pretty confident about. I want you to spend some time with it. Could you explain it to a very intelligent 10-year-old? Are you using complex words to hide a lack of understanding? What would have to change for you to believe something different? If you can't answer that, if there's no possible evidence or argument that could change your mind, then maybe that's not a belief. Maybe it's just an attachment to an identity or a community. Because a real belief is something you hold because you think it's true. And if it's because you think it's true, then there must be some way you could discover it's false. I know this can sound depressing, like I'm saying you can't know anything. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying you should be humble about what you know. I'm saying you should expect to be wrong sometimes. And I'm saying the best way to get closer to truth is not to become more confident in your beliefs. It's to become more suspicious of your confidence. The first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool. That's something I've always believed, and it's true. The good news is that just becoming aware of these biases, confirmation bias, motivated reasoning, the way we rewrite our memories, the availability heuristic, biased explanation, just becoming aware of these things makes you less susceptible to them. You can't completely escape them. They're built into how your brain works. But you can recognize them, you can account for them, you can actively work against them. And that's really what science is at its core. It's not that scientists are smarter than other people or less biased. It's that we have a system, double-blind experiments, peer review, pre-registration of hypotheses. We have a system designed to work around these biases. We assume that humans are biased. We know it. And we build systems to check each other's work, to challenge each other's assumptions, to make sure that our biases don't lead us too far astray. But you don't need a team of scientists to do this for yourself. You can do it as an individual. You can be aware of your biases. You can actively look for evidence that contradicts what you believe. You can force yourself to articulate why you believe what you believe. You can spend time understanding perspectives that contradict your own. And gradually, I think you'll find that your beliefs become more accurate. Not perfect, never perfect, but more accurate, more grounded in reality rather than in the biases of your own mind. So that's really what I wanted to say to you today. Your beliefs are probably wrong. Not all of them, but most of them are incomplete or skewed or based on biases you're not aware of. And that's okay. That's the human condition. But you can do something about it. You can become aware of it. You can work against it. And that makes all the difference. Thank you.